I still remember the day it all began. The smell hit me first, that strange mix of spring thaw and something else. Something wrong. My name is Vincent Redmond, and I've spent my entire life in Yellowstone. The park is in my blood. My grandfather was one of the first rangers here back in the 1920s, and my father followed in his footsteps. Now it's my turn to wear the uniform. That morning, I was patrolling the northeast section like I'd done hundreds of times before. The forest was waking up after a long winter sleep. Birds called to each other through the trees and new green shoots pushed through the melting snow. I should have felt at peace. This was always my favorite time of year. But something felt off. Stopped at Elk Ridge Overlook and pulled out my binoculars. The view stretched for miles, vast forests, open meadows, and the steam rising from hot springs in the distance. The geysers were active today, sending up clouds that hung in the still air like ghosts. That's when I noticed the wolves. Wildlife biologists had been reporting strange behavior for weeks. Wolf packs abandoning their territories and moving toward Human Lake. Not normal. Wolves are creatures of habit. They don't just up and leave their hunting grounds without good reason. I radioed back to headquarters. "This is Redmond. I'm seeing more wolf activity near Human Lake. That's the third pack this week." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Vincent. Anything else unusual?" I hesitated, my eyes drawn to something at the edge of the tree line. "Maybe. I'm going to check out some tracks. I'll report back." I tucked my grandfather's silver pocket watch into my shirt pocket, a habit when I'm nervous, and made my way down to where the forest met the meadow. The tracks were like nothing I'd ever seen in my 18 years as a ranger. They started as human footprints, then gradually changed, the heel elongating, toes spreading until they were unmistakably wolf prints. Then, 20 yards later, they changed back to human. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the mountain. Something moved in my peripheral vision, a deer bolting from the trees, eyes wide with terror. But there was no predator chasing it. All across the meadow, small animals scattered as if fleeing an invisible threat. I knelt beside a steaming hot spring, watching the unnatural mist swirl across the landscape. The weather had been strange, too. Warm for April, with cloud formations I'd never seen before. The sky had a reddish tint even though sunset was hours away. My radio squawked, making me jump. "Vincent, you need to come back to base." It was Harold Blackfoot, the eldest ranger at Yellowstone and my mentor since I was a boy. The astronomy folks at the university called. "There's a rare blood moon lunar eclipse coming in 3 days. A blood moon?" I repeated, not understanding why this warranted a call. "Just get back here," Harold said, his voice tight. "And Vincent, stay away from any wolves you see." I started to respond when a sound cut through the air. A howl, but not like any wolf call I'd ever heard. It rose and fell in patterns almost like words. My skin prickled as more voices joined in, creating a chorus that seemed to be speaking directly to me. I found myself reaching for the watch again, running my thumb over the worn silver case. Dad had been carrying it the day they found what was left of him. The official report said grizzly attack, but I'd never fully believed it. Dad knew bears better than anyone. As I hurried back to my truck, the clouds parted, and I caught a glimpse of the moon already visible in the afternoon sky. It seemed larger than usual, with a faint reddish tinge. 3 days until the blood moon. Something was stirring in my park, in my home, and deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge. Something was stirring in me, too. The dream I'd had last night came flooding back, running on all fours through the forest, the moon guiding my path, my pack surrounding me. I shook my head to clear it. I was Vincent Redmond, park ranger, third-generation protector of Yellowstone. But as I started the engine, the howls came again, and this time, my throat tightened with the urge to answer them. Harold was waiting for me when I got back to the ranger station. At 70 years old, his face was a map of wrinkles, each one telling a story of his 50 years in the park. The Blackfeet elder motioned for me to follow him to the back office. "You felt it too, didn't you?" he asked, closing the door behind us. I nodded, sinking into a chair. Something's wrong with the wildlife. And those tracks I found, I trailed off, not sure how to describe what I'd seen. Harold's dark eyes studied me. Your father saw the same things 20 years ago. My heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? Dad died in a bear attack. Harold shook his head slowly. That's what the report says. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. He reached into an old filing cabinet and pulled out a dusty leather journal. Your father kept this. I've been holding on to it, waiting for the right time. My hands trembled, slightly as I took it. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. Inside was my father's familiar handwriting. April 12, 1965. Wolf packs converging near Human Lake. Tracks changing from human to wolf. Blood moon approaching. Harold's grandfather's stories might be true after all. I looked up at Harold. What? Stories? My people have lived alongside this land for countless generations, Harold said quietly. We have always known about those who walk between worlds, the ones who are neither human nor wolf but something ancient. They emerge during certain celestial events. Like blood moons, I whispered. Harold nodded. Your scientific training tells you this is impossible, but there are things in this world that science hasn't caught up to yet. I wanted to laugh it off, but the tracks I'd seen kept flashing in my mind. And those howls. We need to check something, I said, standing up. The remote ranger outpost at Eagle Point was supposed to be a simple cabin with basic supplies. What we found was destruction. The door had been torn from its hinges. Furniture was splintered. Deep claw marks ran down the walls, not at bear height but standing human height. This wasn't a bear, I said, running my fingers over the gouges in the wood. Harold knelt by the door, examining more of those strange transitional footprints. No, it wasn't. My radio crackled to life. Ranger Redmond? We've got a tourist at the main center. Says he saw a man walking with wolves and speaking to them. Thought you might want to talk to him. I exchanged glances with Harold. Copy that. On our way. The tourist was a college student with a camera around his neck and fear in his eyes. I was hiking near Beaver Meadows, he explained, scrolling through photos on his camera. That's when I saw him. This tall guy with dark hair. He was surrounded by wolves, but they weren't attacking him. It was like they were listening. To him. He handed me his camera. The photo was blurry, taken from a distance, but I could make out a figure standing among at least 5 wolves. Did he see you? I asked. The student nodded. That's the creepy part. He looked right at me and all the wolves turned too, like they were one. Then he smiled. But it wasn't. It wasn't a normal smile. After the student left, Harold led me to a back room filled with the park's oldest records. Look at this, he said, spreading out yellowed papers on a table. Disappearances in Yellowstone, every one of them during a lunar eclipse. The dates stretched back to the park's founding in 1872. Too many to be coincidence. This is crazy, I muttered, but my certainty was slipping away with each passing minute. Harold pulled out a small wooden box. I've been checking the trail cameras. Look. The images made my blood run cold. Wolves standing upright on their hind legs. Shadows that seemed to shift between human and animal. And in one night vision shot, glowing eyes that didn't belong to any animal I recognized. 2 hikers found this yesterday, Harold said, unfolding a map. He pointed to a clearing not far from Human Lake. Dead animals arranged in a circle, specific organs removed. I felt sick. Why didn't anyone report this to me? They did. To your radio. You never responded. I frowned. That's impossible. I've had my radio all day. Harold's expression was grim. They called yesterday afternoon. Where were you then? I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. Yesterday afternoon was blank in my memory. I remembered starting my patrol and then nothing until evening. I don't know, I admitted, a chill spreading through me. Harold reached over and took my hand, turning it palm up. I hadn't noticed the dirt caked under my fingernails or the scratches on my forearm. Vincent, he said softly, there's something else you need to know. Something about your family. But before he could continue, another ranger burst through the door. "We've got a situation," he said breathlessly. "Family of 4 missing from their campsite near Human Lake. And Vincent, there's blood everywhere." I grabbed my gear, pushing aside the questions swirling in my mind. Whatever was happening, people were in danger. My personal mysteries would have to wait. As we headed for the trucks, the clouds parted briefly. The moon hung low and swollen in the sky, its edge already tinged with red. 2 more days until the blood moon would be full. The storm rolled in as our search team headed toward Human Lake. 4 of us total: me, Harold, and 2 newer rangers named Cooper and Martinez. Thunder boomed overhead and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. "Worst weather for a search," Cooper muttered, wiping water from his face. I nodded, but something felt wrong about this storm. It had appeared too suddenly, almost as if it was trying to stop us. We reached the family's campsite just as lightning split the sky. What I saw made my stomach turn. Their tent was shredded, sleeping bags torn to pieces. Camping gear lay scattered and broken. And the blood, it was everywhere, splashed across the ground in patterns that didn't look random. "Are those symbols?" Martinez asked, pointing at marks drawn in blood on a nearby tree. Harold's face went pale. "Don't touch anything," he warned. I pulled out my binoculars and scanned the tree line. The rain made it hard to see clearly, but movement caught my eye about 200 yards away. Human figures stood watching us. At least they looked human until one of them dropped to all 4s. "We're not alone," I said quietly, passing the binoculars to Harold. He looked, then handed them back with shaking hands. "We need to leave, now." "What? We can't just abandon the search," Cooper protested. "There's a family out there." "Those aren't people at the tree line," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "And I don't think there's anyone left to save." Martinez's search dog began, growling, the hair on its back standing straight up. Then, without warning, it snapped at Martinez's hand and bolted into the forest, yelping in terror. "What the—" Martinez started. That's when we heard it. A howl that rose above the storm, joined by another, then another, until the air vibrated with their calls. "Back to the trucks," Harold ordered. We turned to go, but Cooper froze, pointing. "Look." Through the curtain of rain, a man walked toward us. Tall, with dark hair plastered to his head. As he got closer, I recognized him from the tourist's photo. The man who had been speaking to wolves. My hand moved to my gun. "Sir, this area is dangerous. You need to come with us." The man smiled and my blood went cold. His teeth were too sharp, his eyes reflecting the flashlight beams like an animal's. "The blood moon rises," he said, his voice oddly guttural. "The old ways return." Before our eyes, his body began to change. His spine curved, bones cracking as they rearranged. Dark hair sprouted across his skin. His face stretched forward into a muzzle filled with teeth. Where a man had stood moments before, a massive wolf-like creature now balanced on 2 legs, easily 7 feet tall. Martinez screamed. Cooper fired a shot that went wide. "Run!" Harold shouted, pulling me backward. More shapes emerged from the trees, wolves moving in coordinated patterns I'd never seen before. But these weren't ordinary wolves. Some walked on their hind legs. Others seemed caught between forms, partly human, partly animal. We scrambled back toward our vehicles, but the creatures were herding us, cutting off our escape routes. "They're driving us toward the lake," Harold panted. A massive brown bear crashed through the underbrush ahead of us, roaring. Its eyes had the same strange glow as the wolf creatures. "They're controlling the other animals," I realized aloud. Harold nodded, grimly. "The dogmen can bend other predators to their will during the blood moon." The bear charged. Cooper fired again, hitting it in the shoulder. The bear stumbled but kept coming. "This way," I shouted, spotting a narrow ravine the bear would be too big to follow through. We squeezed through the gap just as the bear's claws swiped at us. On the other side, we found ourselves in a small clearing surrounded by steaming hot springs. "We need silver," Harold whispered. "It's their only weakness." I touched my grandfather's silver pocket watch, tucked safely in my shirt. We need to find the missing family, Martinez insisted, though his voice trembled. Harold and I exchanged glances. We both knew what we'd likely find. The trail of blood led us to a flat stone next to the largest hot spring. Steam obscured our vision at first, but as we got closer, I wished it had hidden everything. The family, mother, father, and 2 children, lay arranged in a circle. Parts of them had been consumed. In the center of the circle was a pile of organs, carefully stacked. Martinez turned away and vomited. Cooper stood frozen in shock. "It's a ritual," Harold said quietly. "They're preparing for the full eclipse." Images flashed in my mind, not memories, but something like messages. I saw the dogmen gathered around this same spot as the moon turned, blood red overhead. I felt their hunger, their need to complete some ancient ceremony, and somehow, I knew what they wanted. "They're trying to stay in their half-human forms permanently," I said, the knowledge rising from somewhere deep inside me. "The eclipse gives them power, but it's temporary. They want to make it last." Harold stared at me. "How do you know that?" Before I could answer, howls erupted all around us. We were surrounded. The largest of the dogmen, black-furred with eyes like burning coals, stepped forward. He looked directly at me, and a voice spoke in my head. "You are of the blood, Ranger. You already begin to change. Join us." My head swam with confused images, running through the forest on 4 legs, hunting with the pack, feeling more alive than I ever had before. "Vincent!" Harold's voice cut through the fog. "Don't listen!" The black dogmen snarled and lunged toward Harold. I raised my gun and fired without thinking. The bullet hit the creature's shoulder and it howled in pain and rage. "Silver bullets," Harold said, pressing extra ammunition into my hand. I came prepared. The dogmen attacked from all sides. Cooper went down first, a smaller gray creature tearing at his throat. Martinez fired wildly until a pair of wolves, regular wolves but with glowing eyes, leaped at him, driving him toward a bubbling hot spring. His scream as he fell in will haunt me forever. Harold and I stood back to back, firing at the advancing creatures, but there were too many. "Your father died trying to stop them 20 years ago," Harold shouted over the snarls and gunfire. "During the last blood moon, they're the ones who killed him, not a bear." The truth hit me like a physical blow. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was protecting you. Your family has a connection to them. Your grandfather, your father." A massive paw swung out of the darkness, catching Harold across the chest. He fell, blood pouring from deep gashes. I dropped to my knees beside him as the dogmen closed in around us. "The Alpha," Harold gasped, pressing something into my hand. "Kill the Alpha." It was a silver bullet larger than the others. "How will I know which one?" I asked desperately. Harold's eyes were fading. "You'll know." His hand fell away from mine, and the last of my companions was gone. I stood slowly, facing the circle of dogmen. The black one with red eyes stepped forward, blood, Harold's blood, dripping from its claws, and I knew. This was the Alpha. This was the one I had to kill. Also knew I might not survive long enough to do it. The blood moon was almost upon us. I was alone, the only human left in a circle of monsters. Rain poured down, soaking through my uniform. Lightning flashed, showing the dogmen in brief, terrifying glimpses. Some stood fully upright like the Alpha. Others crouched on all fours, somewhere between wolf and human. All of them watched me with glowing eyes. My mind raced. I couldn't outrun them, couldn't outfight them. My only chance was to outsmart them somehow. "You are already one of us," the Alpha's voice pushed into my thoughts. "Feel the change beginning." And I could feel something. A strange heat in my blood. A sharpening of my senses. I could smell every dogman around me, could hear their breathing over the storm. "I'm nothing like you," I growled. But even my voice sounded different. Deeper, rougher. The alpha's muzzle pulled back in what might have been a smile. Your grandfather knew. Your father knew. The blood runs in your family. Why do you think? You dream of running with wolves? I backed away slowly, trying to put distance between us. My boot touched Harold's body and grief surged through me, clearing my head. What do you want? I demanded, buying time as I tried to form a plan to complete what we began 20 years ago. The ritual requires blood of those with power over this land. Ranger blood. Your father interfered. Now you will serve in his place. I glanced at the sky. Through breaks in the storm clouds, I could see the moon rising. It was already turning red at the edges. The eclipse was beginning. I knew this area of the park better than anyone. If I could just reach the geyser fields. Why now? I asked, taking another step back. Why this blood moon? Once every 20 years, the doorway opens. We can shift forms only during these times unless the ritual is completed. I remembered the missing organs from the family, the careful arrangement of their bodies. A wave of nausea hit me. And if you complete it, we remain as we choose to be forever. No more hiding, no more waiting for the moon. The alpha took a step toward me. Your blood will complete the circle, the blood of 3 generations of guardians. That's when I understood. My grandfather, my father, now me. They had been targeting my family all along. The alpha lunged. I dove to the side, rolling through mud and coming up running. I fired 2 shots over my shoulder, heard a yelp as one found its mark. Not the alpha, but one of the others. The pack gave chase. I could hear them crashing through the underbrush behind me. Normal wolves would have caught me in seconds, but these creatures were heavier, slower in their half forms. I ran like I'd never run before, heading for the place I had in mind. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but something else was driving me now, something wild and desperate. The geyser fields spread out before me, a maze of steaming vents and bubbling mud pots. Dangerous ground, unstable, with thin crusts hiding, scalding water beneath. But I knew every safe path. I'd grown up here. I skidded to a stop at the edge of Old Faithful's basin. The famous geyser was due to erupt soon. I could feel the pressure building beneath my feet. The dogmen slowed, approaching more cautiously now. They spread out, trying to surround me again. The alpha stalked forward, confident, those red eyes, never leaving mine. Nowhere left to run, Ranger. I reached into my pocket, feeling for Harold's special bullet. I had one chance to make this count. I loaded it carefully, keeping my movements small. Why did you kill my father? I asked, voice breaking. What did he do to you? He discovered our ritual grounds, tried to stop us. We would have succeeded, 20 years ago if not for him. The alpha's mental voice was full of hatred. He died protecting you. We would have taken you then, completed the circle. Instead, we had to wait for the moon to return. I remembered now. Flashes of that night, 20 years ago. Dad rushing me to the car, telling me to hide. The sounds of fighting in the woods, waiting for hours until park rangers found me, cold and alone. The eclipse was deepening overhead. The moon glowed an eerie red through breaks in the clouds. I could feel its pull like a physical thing, tugging at something inside me. The alpha, tensed, preparing to spring. Time to fulfill your destiny. My father died protecting this park, I said, raising my gun. I'm his son. I fired. The alpha dodged with impossible speed. The bullet missed, disappearing into the night. The creature's laugh filled my head. You failed, just as he failed. That's when Old Faithful erupted. Scalding water and steam shot 100 feet into the air, catching 2 dogmen who had circled behind me. Their howls of pain cut through the night. The others backed away from the spray, but not the alpha. It charged straight at me through the steam. We collided, rolling across the ground. Its claws ripped through my jacket, tearing into my shoulder. Pain exploded through me. Its jaws snapped, inches from my face, hot breath washing over me. I still had my gun pressed between us. I couldn't aim, couldn't see. The alpha's weight crushed down on me. Its claws dug deeper. Your blood completes the circle, it growled in my mind. Take it then, I gasped, and pulled the trigger. The silver bullet tore through the alpha's chest and into mine. Our blood mixed as we lay there, the creature's body heavy on top of me. Its red eyes widened in shock. "What have you done?" "Ended it," I whispered. The alpha convulsed, its form shifting wildly between human and wolf. Around us, the other dogmen howled in rage and pain. The connection was breaking. I felt myself slipping away, the world growing dark at the edges. The moon overhead was fully eclipsed now, a perfect blood-red circle. The alpha's body dissolved into shadow, seeping into the ground around me. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was the pack retreating into the forest, their forms already becoming more wolf than human as the ritual failed. My blood pooled beneath me, mixing with the alpha's black blood on the steaming ground. Above me, the blood moon watched in silence. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. The official report said I'd been attacked by a rogue wolf pack. The same report claimed Cooper and Martinez died from animal attacks, and Harold had suffered a fatal heart attack during the search. The missing family was listed as victims of a bear attack. Clean. Simple. Believable. I knew better. "You're lucky to be alive," the doctor told me, checking the bandages on my chest. "The bullet missed your heart by inches." I didn't tell him it was my own gun that fired that bullet. Didn't tell him about the alpha's blood mixing with mine as we lay dying, together. Didn't tell anyone about the dreams I had while unconscious. Dreams of running through forests I'd never seen, hunting with a pack that felt like family. Dreams where I wasn't fully human anymore. They released me after 2 weeks. My wounds healed faster than they expected. Much faster. The doctor called it remarkable. I called it terrifying. Spring turned to summer. I returned to my patrols, trying to pretend everything was normal. But nothing was the same. The first time I noticed the changes was during an evening patrol near Human Lake. A deer bolted from the trees ahead of me, and I smelled its fear. Not just saw it, smelled it, like a physical thing in the air. I could hear hikers talking over a mile away, could tell a storm was coming hours before the clouds appeared, and the wolves. They watched me now, followed me at a distance, never threatening, just waiting. I found myself avoiding mirrors. The face looking back at me was still mine, but something in the eyes had changed. They reflected light differently, like an animal's. I started keeping a journal, just like my father had, recording the changes, the strange urges, the way my nails grew thicker, harder to cut, the increased hair growth on my arms and chest. One night, a month after the attack, I woke up outside my cabin, dirt under my fingernails, the taste of something wild in my mouth, no memory of how I got there. It happened again the next full moon, and the next. I found Harold's records hidden in his cabin. Years of observations about those touched by the blood. Rangers and trappers throughout Yellowstone's history who had survived encounters with the dogmen. They all showed the same patterns. Enhanced senses, accelerated healing, partial transformations during full moons, and all of them had eventually become guardians, protectors standing between the human world and the creatures that lurked at its edges. Was that my fate now? To become something not fully human, not fully wolf, but something in between. I visited my father's grave looking for answers. "Did you know this would happen to me someday?" I whispered to the silent stone. "Is this why you tried to protect me?" The park wildlife behaved strangely around me now. Predators gave me space. Prey animals didn't flee. It was as if they recognized something different about me, something that made me neither threat nor victim. Once, tracking illegal hunters, I found myself growling, an actual growl rising from my chest. The sound scared me more than it scared the poachers I caught. I started leaving my grandfather's silver watch locked in a drawer. The silver burned my skin now. Fall came, then winter. Snow blanketed the park, turning Yellowstone into a frozen wonderland. I threw myself into my work, trying to ignore the changes, trying to hold on to my humanity. But each full moon made it harder. One December night, I found marks scratched into the door of my cabin. Not random claw marks, deliberate symbols. The same ones I'd seen drawn in blood at the campsite. The dogmen were watching me, I found other signs too. Dead animals left on my porch. Not mangled, but carefully placed like offerings. Wolf tracks circling my cabin, but no wolves in sight when I looked. They recognize you as pack now, a voice whispered in my dreams. Neither fully theirs, nor fully human. I began to understand what had happened. The silver bullet that killed the alpha had carried its blood into me. I hadn't just killed it, I had replaced it. The night of the next lunar eclipse approached. Not a blood moon this time, just a regular eclipse. But I could feel the pull growing stronger as the date neared. The night had arrived. I sat in my cabin, doors locked, windows barred. A silver knife lay on the table, insurance in case I lost control. As the moon rose, pain shot through my body. My bones felt like they were trying to reshape themselves. My skin burned as if on fire. I fought it, held on to memories of Harold, of my father, remembered what the dogmen had done to that family, to my friends. I am Vincent Redmond, I said through gritted teeth. I am human. But the moon called, and something inside me answered. I found myself standing outside, snow crunching beneath my bare feet. The cold didn't bother me anymore. The forest stretched before me, dark and inviting. At the edge of the trees, shadows moved. Eyes gleamed. The pack was waiting. They recognized me as something between worlds now, part of them, yet still human. Enough to walk in daylight to protect the boundary between their world and ours. My father had done the same, I realized, and his father before him. The silver watch hadn't just been a family heirloom, it had been a reminder, an anchor to humanity. I reached into my pocket and touched the watch I'd finally started carrying again. The silver stung, but the pain helped clear my head. I had a choice to make. I could fight this change forever, denying what I was becoming, or I could accept it, use it to protect the park and its people just as my father had done. The eclipse reached its peak, the moon vanishing into shadow. I felt my body changing, muscles reshaping, senses sharpening even further. But this time, I didn't fight it. I stepped forward, toward the waiting pack, toward my new reality. I was Vincent Redmond, park ranger, protector of Yellowstone, and something more. The next morning they found wolf tracks leading from my cabin into the deep forest. Alongside them were bare human footprints that gradually changed shape, becoming something in between. The blood moon had changed me forever, but some part of me, the most important part, remained human. As long as I remembered that, I could walk between worlds. But sometimes on nights when the moon is full and red, if you listen carefully in the remote parts of Yellowstone, you might hear a howl that sounds almost like words. And if you look quickly enough, you might catch a glimpse of a ranger running with wolves, guarding the boundary between our world and theirs. Just don't look too closely at his eyes. The forest was too quiet this morning. I've walked these trails for 5 years now, and you get a feel for when something's off. Birds should be singing their hearts out at dawn, especially in spring. But today, nothing but the soft crunch of my boots on the path and the occasional whisper of wind through the giant moss-covered trees. My name is Marcus Holloway, park ranger at Olympic National Forest, Washington. Most days I love this job. The silence, the peace, the way the morning fog hangs between these ancient trees like something out of a dream. It helps quiet the memories, the ones from Korea that still wake me up screaming some nights. But today, something felt wrong. Rex felt it too. My German shepherd usually runs ahead on the trail, nose to the ground, tail wagging. Today, he stayed, close, ears perked up, stopping every few minutes to look back into the trees. "What is it, boy?" I asked, kneeling down to scratch behind his ears. He whined softly, pressing against my leg. Strange behavior for a dog who once chased off a black bear without hesitation. The fog was getting thicker instead of burning off. That wasn't right for this time of year. I checked my watch, 8:17 a.m. The sun should be cutting through by now. I spotted something on the trail ahead, tracks crossing from one side to the other, large with 4 toes, Probably elk. But something about the spacing seemed off. I took a photo anyway. Thomas down at the station likes to see anything unusual. He's Quileute, been in these forests his whole life, knows things about this land that no guidebook will tell you. The spring flowers were blooming along the path, trillium and little purple violets pushing up through the dead leaves. Beautiful, but they didn't match the strange chill in the air. I zipped my jacket up higher. Late April shouldn't feel this cold. About 2 miles in, I found the campsite. Someone had set up in a small clearing just off the main trail, against regulations in this section. But that wasn't what bothered me. It was the state of the camp. A small tent was still standing. A backpack leaned against a tree. Food sat on a plate beside a cold fire pit like someone had just started eating and then walked away. Half a sandwich, an apple with 2 bites taken out, a bag of trail mix spilled across the ground. "Hello?" I called out. "Park ranger. Anyone? Here?" Only silence answered back. I reached for my radio. "Base, this is Holloway. I've got an abandoned campsite in Sector 7. No sign of campers. Gear still present. Over." The radio crackled with static. I tried again. Nothing but white noise and something that almost sounded like whispering. I switched channels. Same thing. That's when Rex started acting really strange. He was staring down the trail ahead. Hackles raised, a low growl building in his throat. "What? Is it, boy?" He backed up, still growling, refusing to move forward. I looked down the trail. The fog seemed thicker there, almost solid, and cold. I could feel the temperature drop from here. A shiver ran up my spine that had nothing to do with the chill. That's when I felt it, the sensation of being watched. Not the casual curiosity of a deer or the hungry assessment of a predator. This felt intentional, intelligent. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved in the misty forest, but the feeling remained, prickling across my skin like static electricity. I've spent enough time in the wilderness to trust my instincts. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. I took one last look at the abandoned camp, snapped a few photos with my camera, and decided to head back to the ranger station. Rex didn't need any convincing. He was already pulling toward home, looking back at me with worried eyes. As we turned to leave, I heard it. Just for a second. A voice, calling from deep in the misty forest. "Marcus." It sounded like my brother who died in my arms in Korea 8 years ago. I froze, heart hammering in my chest. It couldn't be. It was just the wind through the trees playing tricks on me. Had to be. But as Rex and I hurried back down the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had called my name was following us just beyond the edge of sight, moving through the mist like a shadow. And I knew, somehow, that this was just the beginning. I wasn't always afraid of the forest. After Korea, it was the only place I felt safe. When I came back from the war in '53, I couldn't sleep in a normal bed. Too soft. Too quiet. I'd wake up screaming, seeing the faces of my unit, men who never made it home. My wife Carol tried to understand. She really did. But how do you explain to someone that the sound of a car backfiring makes you dive for cover? Or that crowds make you scan rooftops for snipers? Or why you can't talk about what happened on that hill in the rain when everyone died except you? "You're home now, Marcus," she'd say, touching the scar that runs from my left eye to my jaw. "You're safe." But I didn't feel safe. Not until I found this park. I was driving aimlessly one weekend after another fight with Carol. Just driving north, no destination. The trees got bigger, the roads emptier. Then I saw the sign for Olympic National Park. Something pulled me in. That first hike, I walked until my legs ached. The giant trees towered overhead like silent guardians. The air smelled of pine and earth. No gunfire, no screams, just peace. 3 months later, I applied to be a ranger. 6 months after that, Carol left. Can't say I blame her. "I can't compete with ghosts, Marcus," she said on her way out the door. "And I can't compete with that forest." The park became my home, my therapy. Each morning I'd wake before dawn in my little cabin near the ranger station, make coffee, and head out with my camera. I documented everything: elk prints in fresh mud, eagle nests high in the trees, the way sunlight filtered through fog in the valleys. Superintendent Wilson worried about me living alone. "Man needs people, Holloway," he'd say during our monthly check-ins. "I've got Rex," I'd answer, patting my dog's head. "And the hikers." That part was true. I might avoid the other rangers, but I never minded helping lost hikers. Showing a kid their first deer. Teaching a city family how to properly store food to keep bears away. Small things that made me feel human again. Thomas Yellow Elk understood me best. He worked maintenance at the park, but he knew these woods better than anyone. His family had lived here for generations. "The forest heals," he told me once as we sat on my porch watching a thunderstorm roll in. "But it also remembers. The land holds on to things, good and bad." He was the first one to mention the hungry spirits in the northern valleys. "My grandfather wouldn't go there," he said, his dark eyes serious in the fading light. "Said something waits there, something that was human once but forgot how to be." I nodded politely but didn't really believe it. I'd seen real monsters in Korea, men who did things no human should do. After that, ghost stories don't scare you much, or so I thought. Looking back, I should have listened closer when Thomas told me about the Wendigo, about the warning signs, the cold that doesn't belong, the hunger that can't be filled, the voices that sound like people you've lost. But that day at the abandoned campsite was my first real clue that something was wrong. When I got back to the station, I reported the site to Wilson. "Probably just day hikers," he said, not looking up from his paperwork. "They left all their gear, sir, and food half-eaten." That got his attention. "Bears in the area?" "No tracks." "And Rex didn't smell anything?" Wilson frowned. "File the report. I'll send Johnson to check it out tomorrow." I nodded, but I knew I'd be going back myself. Something about that voice in the forest, the one that sounded like my brother David, wouldn't let me rest. That night, I pulled out the old compass David had given me before I shipped out. "So you always find your way home," he'd said. David never found his way home from Korea. The compass was all I had left of him. I set it on my table and watched the needle spin lazily to north. Then I remembered how it had gone crazy on the trail, spinning wildly when I pointed it toward the valley where I'd heard the voice. Outside my cabin window, the fog pressed against the glass like something alive. Rex lay by the fire, his eyes following something I couldn't see, and somewhere in the darkness beyond my walls I swear I heard someone whisper my name. I checked my gun that night before going to bed. For the first time since coming to the park, I slept with it under my pillow. The forest didn't feel like safety anymore. It felt like something was hunting me. I went back to that valley the next morning. I know it was stupid. Wilson told me to let Johnson handle it, but I couldn't get that voice out of my head. David's voice. The fog was even thicker this time, hanging between the trees like wet cotton. The temperature dropped with every step I took north. Rex stayed so close he nearly tripped me twice. "It's okay, boy," I said, but I didn't believe it myself. About a mile past the abandoned campsite, I found the first deer. What was left of it, anyway. It hung from a branch 15 feet up. Just the skin and bones, really. Drained. Empty. No blood anywhere on the ground below. No signs of normal predators. My stomach turned. In my 5 years at Olympic, I'd never seen anything like it. Bears, cougars, wolves, they all leave certain signs, tooth marks, claw patterns. This was just wrong. I took photos with shaking hands. That's when I noticed there were more. 3 other deer carcasses hung from branches further ahead, each one skinned and hollow-looking, strung up like horrible decorations. "What the hell?" I whispered. Rex whined and backed away, tail tucked between his legs. I reached for my radio, desperate to report this to someone. The static was even worse here, but through the noise, I heard something that made my blood freeze. "Marcus, help me." Carol's voice, clear as day. My ex-wife was in Chicago. Had been for years. There was no way she was out here in the woods, calling my name. "Who's there?" I shouted, drawing my gun. My voice sounded small in the vastness of the forest. No answer, just the soft drip of moisture from the trees. I pulled out David's compass. The needle spun wildly, around and around, never settling. Useless. That's when I saw the marks on the trees. At first I thought it was bear sign. Bears often claw at tree trunks. But these gouges were at least 9 feet up, higher than any bear could reach. And they were deep, cutting through the thick bark of ancient firs like it was paper. 5 parallel lines, like fingers. But no animal in these woods had hands like that. I started noticing other things too. The smell, like rotting. Meat and something metallic like old pennies. The silence, not even insects made noise here, and the cold. My breath clouded in front of me, though it was nearly May. I decided to head back. Whatever was happening here, I needed help. Maybe Thomas would know something about these signs. That's when my radio suddenly cleared. Urgent. All rangers report, Wilson's voice crackled through. Missing hikers in North Section, 3 college students last seen 2 days ago near Coldwater Ridge. Report in if... The signal cut out again. Coldwater Ridge was less than 2 miles from where I stood. Missing. Hikers. The abandoned camp. The mutilated deer. It was all connected somehow, and the answers were deeper in this valley. I checked my watch, 3:30 p.m. Enough time to reach Coldwater Ridge and start a basic search before dark. Come on, Rex, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Rex wouldn't budge. He stood on the trail, ears flat against his head, a low growl in his throat. I'd never seen him refuse a command before. Rex, come, he barked once sharply, then turned and bolted back down the trail toward home. I was alone. I almost followed him. Should have followed him. But those hikers might still be alive, needing help. I couldn't leave them out here with whatever was hunting in these woods. The trail to Coldwater Ridge grew narrower, less maintained. The fog thickened until I could barely see 20 feet ahead. The only sounds were my own footsteps and ragged breathing. Twice I thought I heard someone walking parallel to me in the trees. When I stopped, the footsteps stopped too. Just your imagination, I told myself. Just nerves. I found the first backpack, about a mile in. It lay torn open on the trail, contents scattered. Clothes, a water bottle, a map. No blood, no signs of a struggle. Just abandoned, like the owner had vanished into thin air. 50 yards later, I found another pack. And a shoe, a hiking boot with the laces still tied. Something was inside it. I picked it up and nearly threw it down again. Bone fragments, small pieces of what looked horribly like a human foot. My hand shook as I set it back down. This wasn't an animal attack. Animals don't take the time to place body parts neatly inside shoes. Something moved in the trees to my left. Something, tall and thin, gone before I could focus on it. Hello, I called, my voice cracking. Park ranger, anyone there? Something answered, a sound like branches breaking, but rhythmic, almost like laughter. The shadows were growing longer. I had maybe an hour of daylight left. The smart thing would be to mark this location and come back with a full search team tomorrow. But as I turned to head back, I saw them. Symbols carved into the trees surrounding the trail. Fresh cuts, still oozing sap. The same symbol repeated, over and over. A stick figure with too many limbs and a head like a deer's skull. I recognized it from one of Thomas's stories. A warning sign. His people carved them to mark places where the Wendigo had been seen. The Wendigo. A spirit of hunger and winter. A person who had eaten human flesh and become something else. Something cursed to wander the forests, forever starving, forever hunting. A story to scare children, I told myself. Just old legends. But as the wind picked up, carrying that rotting meat smell stronger than before, I wasn't so sure anymore. The trees seemed to close in around me. The fog twisted into shapes almost human, almost familiar. I thought I saw David, standing just off the trail, his army uniform torn and bloody like the last time I saw him. Then Carol reaching out with pale hands. Not real, I whispered to myself. Not real. I turned to run and crashed straight into something solid that hadn't been there a second before. I fell back, fumbling for my gun. Marcus. Thank God. A young man stood over me, pale and thin, his clothes torn and dirty. Behind him were two others, a young woman and another man, both looking terrified. "We've been lost for days," the first man said. "Something's been following us. Something not right. The missing hikers. They were alive." But as I got to my feet, I noticed how they all stared at me with two wide eyes. How none of them blinked. How their skin seemed almost gray in the fading light. And I realized with growing horror that I could see the trees through their bodies just slightly, as if they weren't quite solid. "You need to run, Ranger Holloway," the woman said, her voice oddly flat. "It knows your name now. It knows what you fear." A freezing wind blasted through the clearing, and all three hikers dissipated like smoke. I ran, faster than I've ever run in my life, back down that trail as darkness fell and the forest came alive with whispers. Behind me, something followed. Something that wasn't human, that moved through the trees like mist, calling my name in the voices of everyone I'd ever lost. I made it back to my cabin just as a storm hit. Not a normal spring rain, but a full-on blizzard. In April. Impossible. I slammed the door behind me, hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the lock. Rex was there, thank God, huddled under my bed. He wouldn't come out, not even for food. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, but we both knew it wasn't. The phone lines were down. Radio, too. Nothing but static and those whispers. I was cut off. I pulled. Every curtain closed and built up the fire as wind howled outside. The temperature had dropped to near freezing. Snow in late April. Wrong. All wrong. Sleep was out of the question. I cleaned my gun, checked my supplies, and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. Those hikers, were they ghosts, hallucinations? Whatever they were, they'd tried to warn me. The knocking started around midnight, soft at first, like branches against the window, then harder, deliberate, tap, tap, tap. I ignored it, telling myself it was just the storm. Then the voice came. "Marcus, are you there? Let me in, it's freezing out here." David's voice. My dead brother standing on my porch in a blizzard. "Not real," I said aloud, hands pressed over my ears. "Marcus, please, I'm so cold, why won't you help me? You let me die in Korea, are you going to let me die again?" I bit my lip until I tasted blood. "Not real. Not real." The voice changed. "Marcus? Honey, please open the door. I made a mistake leaving you. I want to come home." Carol now. Perfect imitation of her voice, down to the way she always said my name, a little higher on the second syllable. I grabbed my flashlight and gun, moving to the window. Carefully, I pulled the curtain back just an inch and pointed the beam outside. Nothing. There. Just swirling snow and darkness. Then something moved at the edge of the light. Tall, much taller than any man. Thin, impossibly thin, like a skeleton wrapped in pale skin. It stood motionless in the trees, watching my cabin. The beam caught its face. I dropped the flashlight. Not a face. A skull. A deer's skull, yellowed with age, sitting atop a human-like body. Antlers spread wide against the night sky, reaching, up like gnarled hands, the Wendigo. I backed away from the window, heart hammering in my chest. This couldn't be happening. Monsters weren't real. This was stress, PTSD, exhaustion, anything but real. The scratching started then, not just at the door, but all around the cabin, along the walls, across the roof, like long fingernails dragging, slowly over wood. Scritch, scritch, scritch. A window shattered in my bedroom. Cold air rushed in, carrying snow and that rotting smell. Rex howled in terror. I ran to the room, gun raised, but saw nothing. Just broken glass and snow on the floor. The window was too small for anything human-sized to enter. Then I felt it. An intense, overwhelming hunger. Like I hadn't eaten in weeks. My stomach cramped painfully. I was suddenly starving, though I'd had dinner just hours ago. The hunger was like nothing I'd ever felt. My hands shook with it, my vision blurred. All I could think about was food. Meat. Something to fill this terrible emptiness inside me. I stumbled to the kitchen, tore open the refrigerator. Nothing looked right. Nothing would satisfy this hunger. I needed something else. In the darkest corner of my mind, a thought formed. Rex would be enough meat to stop this pain. I jerked back, horrified at myself. What was happening to me? The hunger is just the beginning, a voice whispered from the shadows of my kitchen. Not David's voice, not Carol's. Something ancient and cold. It never stops. Not until you become like me. I fired my gun at the voice. The bullet went through, empty air lodging in my kitchen wall. The laughter came again, that broken branch sound. It was inside my cabin now, moving around me, though I could see nothing. You can't kill hunger, Marcus Holloway. You can only feed it. The blizzard grew stronger, snow blowing in through the broken window. The cold was unbearable now, seeping into my bones. And still that hunger clawed at me from the inside. I knew I couldn't stay here. The Wendigo was toying with me, driving me mad with hunger and cold. I had to get to the ranger station, find Thomas. He would know what to do. I grabbed my heaviest coat, my gun, and a flashlight. Rex refused to leave his spot under the bed, even when I tried to drag him out. "I'll come back for you, boy," I promised, though part of me knew it was a lie. The moment I stepped outside, the wind nearly knocked me flat. The snow was knee-deep already, still falling fast. I could barely see the path to my truck. Something moved in the trees around my cabin. Multiple somethings. Tall, thin shapes, watching me. More than one Wendigo? Or just the same one somehow? In many places at once, I trudged through the snow toward my truck, fighting the wind every step. The hunger was getting worse, a gnawing emptiness that made it hard to think straight. The truck wouldn't start. Of course it wouldn't. The ranger station was 2 miles away. I could make it on foot, even in this storm. Had to. I set off down the road, flashlight beam barely cutting through the swirling snow. The shapes followed me, just outside the light. Sometimes running between trees. Sometimes walking just behind me, footsteps crunching in perfect time with mine. Halfway there, I heard a voice calling for help. A woman's voice, young and terrified. "Please, somebody, we're freezing to death." Against my better judgment, I turned toward the voice. Just off the road was an old Forest Service cabin, one we rarely used anymore. A faint light glowed in the window. More voices now. A man shouting for help. Another woman crying. Real people this time? Or another trick? I had to know if there were actually people trapped out here with that thing. I couldn't leave them. I approached the cabin slowly, gun ready. The voices grew louder. "Hello? Park Ranger," I called. The door flew open. A young man stood there, wild-eyed, with relief. "Oh, thank God, we got caught in the storm. Please come in." Behind him I could see 2 others, a young woman and another man, the missing hikers, the same ones I'd seen as ghostly figures on the trail. But they looked solid now, real. I hesitated at the threshold. Something wasn't right. "You were on Coldwater Ridge," I said. "I saw you there." The young man looked confused. "We got lost up there, yeah. Been trying to find our way back for days. Then this storm hit and we found this cabin. Please, it's freezing out there." I studied their faces. Normal, scared, human. Not like the weird, see-through versions I'd encountered in the forest. Had that been a hallucination? Was this real? The hunger hit me again, so strong I nearly doubled over. These people had food, warmth. I could smell something cooking inside. I stepped into the cabin. The 3 hikers introduced themselves. James, Megan, and Tyler. They'd been on a weekend trip, gotten turned around in the fog. Found the cabin just as the snow started. "We tried the radio," James said, pointing to an old emergency unit in the corner. Nothing but static. Megan handed me a bowl of soup from a pot on the wood stove. "You look half frozen," she said. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the hunger was maddening. I gulped down the soup so fast I barely tasted it. "Is something following you?" Tyler asked suddenly. "We've been hearing things. Outside." I looked at their frightened faces and decided not to tell them everything. "Not yet. Just the storm," I lied. "We'll head to the ranger station when it lets up." But as the night wore on, things got stranger. Ice formed on the inside of the windows, though the stove was blazing hot. The radio occasionally burst to life with fragments of voices, different voices each time, all calling my name. And the hunger never stopped, no matter how much I ate. James seemed to feel it too. I caught him staring at Megan's neck once, a look in his eyes that made my skin crawl. When I blinked, his face seemed to change for just a second. Gaunt, skull-like. Outside, the wind carried sounds no storm should make. Laughter, crying, screaming. The shapes moved constantly around the cabin, visible through the frosted windows. More than one now. Definitely more than one. "What are those things out there?" Megan whispered, peering through the glass. Before I could answer, James grabbed her arm. "Don't look at them," he hissed. "It makes them stronger." "How do you know that?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. James stared at me, and for a moment, his eyes seemed wrong. "Not human, it told me," he whispered. "In my dreams." The night grew colder. Our breath hung in the air despite the fire roaring in the stove. Nobody slept. We all felt it. That terrible hunger, the sensation of being watched. Around 3 a.m. we ran low on firewood. "I'll get more," I said, needing to escape the cabin's growing tension. James hadn't stopped staring at Megan and Tyler with that strange, hungry look. "I'll come with you," Tyler offered. "No," James said quickly. "You should stay here. With us." Something in his voice made my hand move to my gun, but I needed that firewood and the woodpile was just behind the cabin. I'd be quick. "Lock the door behind me," I told them. "Don't open it for anything but my voice." Outside, the storm had calmed somewhat. The snow still fell, but the wind had died down. The silence was worse, somehow. I could hear my own heartbeat, too loud in my ears. The woodpile was covered in snow. I brushed it off, loaded my arms with logs. That's when I noticed the tracks around the pile. Not human tracks. More like a deer's, but wrong. Too large, and the spacing was odd, like the creature moved by leaping great distances. I followed the tracks with my eyes. They circled the cabin, completely before heading into the forest. Then I saw something that made my blood freeze. Another set of tracks leading from the cabin into the woods. Human tracks, fresh. Someone had left the cabin while I was getting wood. I dropped the logs and ran back to the front door, pounding on it. "Megan, Tyler, open up." Tyler opened the door, his face pale with shock. "He took her," he said. James just changed, started talking in this weird voice, grabbed Megan and ran out the back window. I couldn't stop him. I pushed past him into the cabin. The back window was shattered, snow piling on the floor beneath it. Blood smeared the broken glass. "Where's my gun?" I demanded. He took that too. I still had my flashlight and my knife. It would have to be enough. "Stay here," I told Tyler. "Barricade the door. Don't let anyone in but me. And check that it's really me." I followed the tracks from the back window. They were easy to spot. One set of bare human footprints, smaller ones being dragged alongside. James and Megan. The trail led deeper into the forest, away from the road. The hunger in my stomach grew worse with every step, like something alive, trying to claw its way out. The trees seemed to watch me pass, their branches reaching down like hands. Ice hung from them in strange formations that didn't look natural, more like symbols or letters in a language I couldn't read. I heard Megan scream before I saw them. In a small clearing ahead, James stood with his back to me. He'd changed. His body was elongated somehow, limbs too thin and too long. He held Megan by the throat with one hand. In the other, he held my gun. Megan's eyes met mine over James's shoulder. She was still alive, but barely fighting anymore. "James?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let her go." He turned slowly. His face, God, his face. It wasn't human anymore. His jaw had stretched, teeth now sharp and too numerous. His eyes were black pools, no whites visible. When he smiled, his mouth opened far wider than any human mouth should. "James isn't here anymore," he said, his voice layered with others beneath it. "He was so hungry, so cold. He let me in." "Let her go," I repeated, taking a step forward. The thing that used to be James laughed. "Why? There's plenty for both of us, Marcus. The hunger never stops, but you can learn to live with it. Like me." He pressed the barrel of my gun against Megan's temple. I lunged forward, knife raised. James moved with impossible speed, throwing Megan aside and meeting me halfway. The gun went off, the bullet grazing my shoulder. Pain exploded through me, but I kept moving, driven by desperation. I slashed with the knife, catching him across the chest. No blood flowed from the wound. Instead, a black tar-like substance oozed out, freezing instantly in the cold air. James, or the thing wearing James's body, grabbed my wrist with inhuman strength. I felt bones grinding together, the knife falling from my numb fingers. "You can't fight hunger," he whispered, his face inches from mine. "You can only feed it." His mouth opened wider, unhinging like a snake's. I could see down his throat, not pink flesh, but darkness and ice. I headbutted him with all my strength, feeling something crack. He stumbled back, giving me a moment to scramble for my gun, which had fallen in the snow. I fired 3 shots into his chest. The impacts knocked him backward, but he stayed on his feet, laughing that broken branch laugh. "Your turn to change," he said, and leaped at me. We crashed to the ground, rolling through the snow. His strength was incredible, his body bending in impossible ways as we fought. His fingers had grown into claws, tearing through my coat, searching for flesh. I managed to get the gun between us and fired again, point blank into his chest. This time he screamed, a sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake. He reared back, and I scrambled away, grabbing Megan's arm as I passed her. "Run!" I shouted, pulling her to her feet. We crashed through the forest, the thing that was once James howling behind us. I had no idea which direction we were going. All I knew was that we needed to get away. The trees thinned out ahead, revealing a frozen lake. The storm had covered it with snow, making it impossible to tell where the shore ended and the ice began. "We can lose him in the trees on the other side," I gasped, my lungs burning from the cold air. We stepped onto the ice, moving as fast as we dared. Behind us, James's howls grew closer. Halfway across, I heard a sound that stopped my heart. A long, deep crack. The ice beneath our feet shuddered. "Run!" I shouted again, pushing Megan ahead of me. We'd gone only a few more steps when the ice gave way beneath me. One moment I was running. The next, I was plunged into water so cold it felt like fire. The shock of it drove the air from my lungs. I fought to the surface, gasping. Megan was screaming my name from the edge of the hole, reaching for me. As I struggled to pull myself out, I saw something in the water beneath me. Bodies, dozens of them, suspended in the ice like flies in amber. Men, women, some in old-fashioned clothes, some in modern hiking gear, all perfectly preserved, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Hands grabbed at my legs, pulling me down. Not the current, actual hands, pale and strong. The dead beneath the ice were not completely dead. With a final surge of strength, I pulled myself onto the solid ice and rolled away from the hole. My left arm wouldn't work right. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. "The shore," I gasped to Megan. "Go." We half crawled, half ran the rest of the way across the lake. My wet clothes were freezing solid, every movement agony. The cold was so intense I could feel my thoughts slowing down. We reached the tree line just as James stepped onto the ice behind us. He walked across it casually, the frozen surface holding his weight as if he were made of nothing at all. "We can't outrun him," Megan sobbed. "We don't have to. I said, remembering Thomas's stories. We just have to survive until dawn. Wendigos were creatures of night and winter. Their power lessened in daylight. At least, that's what the legends said. I looked at the eastern sky. Still dark, but maybe a hint of gray on the horizon. Or was that just wishful thinking? I still had the gun, 2 bullets left. Not enough to stop James, but maybe enough to buy us time. We backed into the trees, looking for somewhere to make a stand. My left arm hung useless at my side, frostbite setting in fast. I could die out here, I realized. We both could. Then I saw it. A massive old cedar, its trunk split open by lightning long ago. A small hollow inside, just big enough for Megan. Get in there, I told her. Whatever happens, stay hidden until sunrise. What about you? She asked, teeth chattering from cold and fear. I didn't answer, just helped her into the hiding spot. Then I turned to face James, who was emerging from the lakeshore, walking with that strange, jerky gait. His body looked even less human now, stretched and twisted, joints bending backward, fingers elongated into claws. I raised the gun with my good arm, aiming carefully. "That won't help you," James called, his voice echoing strangely through the trees. "You're already changing. Can't you feel it, the hunger?" He was right. Despite the freezing cold, despite the terror, that gnawing emptiness in my stomach was the strongest sensation. I wanted to eat, needed to eat, anything, anyone. No, I wouldn't become like him. I remembered what Thomas had told me once about Wendigos. They're cursed by their own choices, he'd said. They chose hunger over humanity. I still had a choice. I fired one shot, not at James, but at a branch above him, heavy with snow. It came crashing down, momentarily burying him. Then I ran, away from Megan's hiding spot, drawing James after me. The sky was definitely growing lighter now. Minutes until dawn. I just had to last minutes. James caught up to me in a small clearing. I fired my last bullet, catching him in the shoulder. He barely flinched. "Join us," he said, gesturing around. For the first time, I realized we weren't alone. Shapes moved at the edge of the clearing, tall, thin creatures with animal skulls for faces. 5, maybe 6 of them, all watching, waiting. "There have always been Wendigos in these mountains," James said, "waiting for people like you, people who understand real hunger." He reached out one long-fingered hand, almost gently. "Your brother is here with us, and others you've lost. We're a family, Marcus." For one terrible moment I wavered. The hunger was so strong, the cold so deep in my bones. It would be easy to give in. Then the first ray of sunlight broke through the trees, touching James's twisted face. He hissed, stepping back. The other shapes retreated as well, fading into the forest as dawn spread across the sky. James snarled at me, his face caught between human and monster. "This isn't over. You're marked now. You belong to us." He reached out with impossible speed, his clawed hand pressing against my chest. Burning pain seared through me like he'd branded me with ice. Then he was gone, moving through the trees faster than my eye could follow. The other Wendigos vanished with him, melting into the morning mist. I fell to my knees in the snow, clutching my chest where he'd touched me. Even through my clothes, I could feel it, a raised mark in the shape of an antlered skull. The sun rose fully, the unnatural storm fading with the night. My left arm was badly frostbitten, useless. But I was alive, and still human. I found Megan in her hiding place, half frozen but alive. Together, we made our way back to the ranger station as the snow began to melt in the morning sun. They found Tyler's body back at the cabin, what was left of it. The official report said animal attack. No one believed my story about James transforming, about the things in the forest. They blamed shock, exposure, trauma. I lost my left arm below the elbow to frostbite. Lost my job too. Medical discharge. They said I was unstable, suffering from PTSD. Maybe they were right. I still live near the park. Can't bring myself to leave. Thomas visits sometimes. He's the only one who believes me. He performed a protection ritual on my cabin, but warned me it might not be enough. "The Wendigo marked you," he said, looking at the scar on my chest. "Still cold to the touch even, in summer heat. It's patient. It can wait." The northern section of the park is closed now, officially for environmental assessment. Unofficially, 3 more rangers went missing up there last winter. On cold nights, I hear them outside my cabin, calling my name in familiar voices. David, Carol, my army buddies, even James sometimes. The hunger comes back too, not as strong as that night, but always there, waiting, a hollow feeling no food can fill. I've started collecting stories, newspaper clippings, old journals, anything about Wendigos or similar creatures across the country. There are more of them than people think, more every year as winters grow longer and people grow more desperate. Sometimes I wonder how long I can resist, how many cold nights I can endure before I open my door to the voices, before I let the hunger win. I keep David's compass on my bedside table. The needle still points north steady now, but sometimes late at night I catch it spinning wildly from the corner of my eye, and I know they're still out there, waiting, hungry, always hungry. I still remember the sound of that first scream echoing through the darkness, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Elaine Thornton, and until 3 years ago, I was just another failed academic with a crazy theory nobody believed. Now I'm a park ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky, home to the longest cave system in the world. Most days I feel more at home in these winding tunnels than I ever did in university lecture halls. "Watch your step, folks," I called out to the tour group following behind me. "These limestone formations have been growing for millions of years. One careless touch could destroy what took nature centuries to create." I adjusted my ranger hat and made sure my red braid was secure. The last thing I needed was hair falling in my face when navigating tight passages. My wire-rimmed glasses were already starting to fog up from the cave's humidity. "Up ahead is one of my favorite formations," I said, pointing my flashlight toward the ceiling. "We call it the frozen waterfall because the calcium deposits look like water stopped in mid-flow." A balding man in a Hawaiian shirt raised his hand. "How deep are we right now?" "About 300 feet below the surface," I answered, the words automatic after so many tours. But Mammoth Cave has mapped passages going down much further, and hundreds of miles that haven't even been explored yet. I led them around a corner to a small chamber where ancient artifacts were displayed behind protective glass. These reed baskets and tools were left by Native Americans who ventured into these caves over 4,000 years ago, I explained, running my fingers along the edge of the display. They used these spaces for ceremonies, and the ground beneath us trembled, just slightly, but enough to send a shower of dust from the ceiling. A few people gasped. "It's okay," I assured them, though my heart had jumped too. Small tremors happen occasionally. The cave system is very stable, but something felt different this time. As the dust settled, I heard it, faint echoes coming from deeper in the cave system, almost like distant voices. "Did you hear that?" asked a small boy near the front, his eyes wide.
"Just the cave settling," I said with a smile, though I wasn't convinced myself. I led the group forward, but something was off. The frozen waterfall formation looked different. I'd just been here yesterday, and I could have sworn it had shifted.
Position. That wasn't possible, of course. Limestone formations don't move overnight. "Is it supposed to be that warm in here?" asked a woman in a red jacket, fanning herself. She was right. This section should be a cool 54 degrees, but it felt at least 10 degrees warmer. I pulled out my thermometer from my pocket and frowned at the reading. "Just a temporary fluctuation," I said, jotting the unusual temperature in my notebook. I wrote everything down, a habit from my research days that I couldn't shake. As we moved deeper, my flashlight began to flicker despite the fresh batteries I'd put in that morning. The beam illuminated patches of strange blue-green fungi growing on the walls, fungi I'd never seen documented in any of the park's biological surveys. "Look, Mommy! People!" the small boy suddenly shouted, pointing toward a dark side passage. Everyone turned, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. "Your imagination is running wild, buddy," his mother said with a nervous laugh, but I wasn't so sure. My skin prickled with goosebumps that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. In 3 years of leading tours and my own solo explorations, I'd learned one thing for certain. Mammoth Cave kept secrets. Deep, ancient secrets. And sometimes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something down here was watching us, waiting for us. Something that didn't want to be discovered. The flickering of my flashlight grew worse, plunging us momentarily into complete darkness before sputtering back to life. In those brief seconds of total black, I heard it again, whispers from the depths that sounded almost like words. I clutched my notebook tighter. Maybe my crazy theories weren't so crazy after all. Retry DT. That night in my small cabin at the edge of the park, I couldn't sleep. The memory of those whispers kept me awake. I got up and pulled out my old research papers from the wooden chest I kept locked under my bed. Subterranean humanoid species, evidence of prehistoric cave dwellers in North America, read the title of my paper, the one that had ended my career. I still remember my department head's face turning red as he waved my published article. "This is embarrassing, Thornton. You've made our entire anthropology department a laughingstock." My parents hadn't been any more supportive. "We paid for medical school, Elaine," my father had said during our last phone call 3 years ago. "Instead, you chased fairy tales in caves and threw away a real future." I hadn't spoken to them since. I flipped through my notebook where I'd been mapping new passages on my days off. Park rules said rangers should never explore alone, but some rules needed breaking if I was ever going to find what I knew was down there. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Still up? Saw your light. On. Want company?" Michael Peterson was the youngest senior ranger at Mammoth Cave. Tall, with kind eyes and a patient smile. He was the only one who didn't look at me like I was crazy when I talked about my theories. "Just working. Early tour tomorrow." "Rain check?" I texted back. The truth was, I didn't want him to see the maps I was making, the ones that showed how deep I'd really been going on my solo trips. I pulled out a small box containing artifacts I'd found in the deepest chambers, ones I hadn't reported or turned in. A stone tool with symbols no archaeologist would recognize, polished smooth by hands that weren't human. A small figurine carved from cave crystal depicting something with long limbs and no eyes. My fingers traced the symbols I'd copied from deep cave walls, symbols that matched no known Native American language. The academic world had laughed when I suggested these represented communication from a species that evolved separately from humans, adapted to permanent darkness. But I knew I wasn't crazy. Ever since I started working here, my senses had sharpened in the darkness. I could navigate pitch-black passages by feel and sound alone now. And the dreams. Vivid dreams of discoveries waiting in the deepest parts of the cave. Places no human had ever mapped. A letter from Dr. Abrams sat on my desk. He was one of the few fringe archaeologists who still corresponded with me, who believed there might be truth in my theories. "Keep looking, Elaine," he'd written. Mainstream science laughed at the idea of Neanderthals until we found their bones. I tucked everything away and tried to sleep, but my dreams were filled with whispers from the darkness and pale figures watching from just beyond the reach of my flashlight. The next morning, Michael caught me in the staff room as I poured my third cup of coffee. "You look terrible," he said, leaning against the counter. "Another late night?" "Thanks for the compliment," I said, trying to smile. "Just couldn't sleep." He lowered his voice. "Been exploring again, haven't you? Alone?" I shrugged. "Someone has to map those passages." "It's dangerous, Elaine. The rules exist for a reason." His eyes were worried. "I care about you, you know." I felt a pang of guilt. Michael was a good man. Maybe in another life where I wasn't obsessed with proving everyone wrong, something could happen between us. "I'm careful," I assured him. The radio on his belt crackled. to life. Peterson, Thornton, report to main office. Urgent. We exchanged concerned glances. Urgent calls were rare. Park Superintendent Davis was waiting with a grim expression. We've got 4 spelunkers missing since yesterday. Experienced group with permits for the eastern passages. They were due to check in last night. My stomach tightened. The eastern passages were near areas I'd been secretly exploring. Last radio contact, Michael asked. Said they found a narrow crevice leading to what might be a new chamber. Then nothing. I thought about the tremor yesterday, the strange echoes that sounded like voices. Thornton, Peterson, you're our best cave specialists, Davis continued. Take Williams and Chen and find these people. As we gathered rescue gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I'd been searching for all these years was finally ready to be found. And that terrified me more than I wanted to admit. 4 hours later, we were deep in the eastern passages. Our headlamps cut through the darkness, creating dancing shadows on the damp walls. I led the way, with Michael close behind. Williams and Chen, 2 experienced cave guides, brought up the rear. Their last known position should be just ahead, I said, checking the map. The air felt different here, warmer, heavier somehow. My skin prickled with that familiar feeling that we weren't alone. Look, Michael pointed to a narrow crevice in the wall. That wasn't on any of our maps. He was right. I'd been through this section at least a dozen times, and I'd never noticed that opening before. It was as if the rock had split open recently. This has to be where they went, William said, shining his light into the gap. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. We found their gear just inside the crevice. Backpacks, water bottles, extra batteries, all abandoned in a hurry. No signs of blood or struggle, just emptiness. They wouldn't leave their equipment, Chen said, picking up an expensive camera. Not willingly. I moved my light along. The walls unfroze. There, carved into the stone, were symbols. The same symbols from my research. The ones that had gotten me laughed out of academia. My hands shook as I traced the markings. These weren't here before. How do you know? Michael asked. I couldn't tell him I'd been here on my unauthorized explorations. Just a feeling. I pulled out my notebook and quickly copied the symbols. They seemed to point deeper into the unknown passage. Radio back to base, I told Williams. Let them know we found their gear. He raised the radio to his mouth, but only static came through. Frowned and tried again. Nothing. That's weird, he said. It was working fine a few minutes ago. We're probably too deep, Michael suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. We squeezed through the crevice one by one, entering a tunnel that sloped steeply downward. The air grew even warmer, which made no sense. Temperature should drop the deeper we went. After 20 minutes of careful descent, the passage opened into a chamber the size of a basketball court. Our lights couldn't reach the ceiling. Whoa, Chen whispered, her voice echoing. The walls were covered with paintings, not the simple pictographs found in other parts of the cave system, but detailed images of thin, elongated humanoid figures, with no eyes and markings on their skin. They were shown emerging from solid rock, standing beside much smaller human figures. These look fresh, Michael said, touching one of the images. His finger came away with a smudge of pigment. My heart raced. These paintings matched exactly what I described in my rejected research papers. A species adapted to subterranean life, with the ability to move through solid rock. A species that existed alongside humans but remained hidden. We need to move on, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The spelunkers could be further in. Williams pulled out his compass and frowned. This can't be right. He showed us the needle spinning wildly, never settling on north. Chen checked her watch and gasped. My watch is running backward. I felt a chill despite the increasing heat. These were all signs I'd written about, phenomena reported near sightings of subterranean beings. But even I hadn't truly believed they were real. Until now. We found a spelunker's helmet on the ground near an opening to another tunnel. Michael picked it up, turning it over in his hands. Are those claw marks? Williams asked, pointing to deep scratches in the plastic, There was something else, too. A blue substance that clung to the edges of the scratches. When Michael touched it, it glowed faintly against his skin. "Don't," I warned, too late. "It's warm," he said, trying to wipe it off, but it clung to his fingers like living glue. The temperature around us rose suddenly, becoming almost unbearable. Sweat poured down my face. "Did you hear that?" Chen whispered, turning toward a dark corner of the chamber. We all went silent. There, it was. Voices speaking in a language like nothing I'd ever heard. Low, rumbling sounds that seemed to come through the rock itself. "Hello?" Williams called out. "We're with the National Park Service. We're looking for 4 missing people." The voices stopped instantly. "We should keep moving," I said, pointing to a wide tunnel leading deeper. My gut told me this was the way, though I couldn't explain why. As we entered the tunnel, Chen suddenly grabbed my arm. "Something touched me," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Probably just brushed against the wall," Michael said, but we all knew the passage was too wide for that. Williams, who had been bringing up the rear, let out a startled cry. "There's someone back there, I saw them." We all spun around, lights searching the darkness. For a split second I thought I saw it too. A pale figure with long limbs, watching us from just beyond the reach of our lights. Then it was gone, as if it had melted into the stone. "Let's stick together," Michael said, his voice tight with tension. "No one gets separated." But as we turned to continue, I realized we'd made a terrible mistake coming down here. Whatever lived in these depths was now aware of us, and I had the sickening feeling that we were being herded deeper, exactly where they wanted us to go. The Isekar tunnel opened into a cavern so vast our lights couldn't reach the other side. The air was thick and hot, making it hard to breathe. A strong smell like wet earth and something else, something alive, filled my nose. "Look," I whispered, pointing. Ahead, at the center of the cavern, was an underground lake, its black water perfectly still. But what made us all freeze was what surrounded it. Plants and fungi unlike anything I'd ever seen, all glowing with soft blue-green light. Enough light to see without our headlamps. "This isn't possible," Chen said. "Nothing should be able to grow down here." "Turn off your lights," I said. "Save the batteries." As our headlamps clicked off one by one, the true beauty of the place became clear. The entire cavern was alive with soft light. Glowing moss carpeted the floor, and strange, tall mushrooms pulsed with gentle rhythms. That's when I saw them. Across the lake, standing perfectly still, were figures. Tall, thin figures with arms and legs longer than any humans should be. Their skin was pale, not white, but the translucent paleness of creatures that have never seen the sun. And they glowed, faint patterns of light shifting across their skin like slow-moving electricity. "Oh my God," Michael breathed beside me. They had no eyes, just smooth skin where eyes should be. Yet I knew with absolute certainty that they were watching us. "Don't move," I whispered. "Don't run." Williams whimpered, behind me. "What are they?" "The missing link in human evolution," I said, my voice shaking with excitement and fear. "A branch that went underground instead of staying on the surface. They've been down here for thousands of years." As if responding to my words, one of the creatures stepped forward. It moved with impossible grace, its long fingers trailing through the air. Then it did something that made my blood run cold. It stepped directly into the solid rock wall beside the lake and passed through it like it was walking through fog. "That's not possible," Chen gasped. A moment later, the creature emerged from the wall right beside us, not 10 feet away. Williams screamed and stumbled backward. Michael reached for his flare gun. "No," I hissed. "Don't threaten them." But it was too late. The creature turned toward Williams, who was now pressed against the tunnel wall. It reached out one long, thin hand. "Stay back," Williams shouted. The creature's fingers touched the wall beside Williams. Instantly, strange symbols lit up in the rock, glowing with the same light as the markings on the creature's skin. The symbols spread across the wall in flowing patterns. "They're communicating," I realized. "This is their writing system." Before anyone could respond, the rock around Williams seemed to soften. He screamed as his arms sank into the wall as if it were quicksand. "Help! Me!" he cried, panic in his voice. Chen grabbed his free hand and pulled, but it was like the wall was sucking him in. The creature just stood there, watching without eyes as Williams was pulled deeper into the solid rock. "Do something!" Chen screamed at me. But what could I do? This was beyond anything I'd imagined, even in my wildest theories. In seconds, Williams was gone, the rock solid once more where he had stood. Michael raised his flare gun. "Let them go!" he shouted at the creature, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Michael, don't!" I warned, but he fired. The flare shot past the creature and exploded against the far wall, bathing everything in harsh red light. The effect was immediate. All around the cavern, dozens more creatures appeared, stepping out from walls I'd thought were solid, and they weren't happy. The ground beneath us rumbled. Small rocks fell from the ceiling. One large boulder crashed, down just feet from Chen, missing her by inches. They can control the cave, I realized. They're causing the rock falls. More symbols lit up across the walls, floors, and ceiling. A conversation happening all around us that we couldn't understand. Images flashed in my mind. Vivid pictures of an ancient civilization living in harmony with the darkness, of humans coming too close, of territory violated. They weren't speaking out loud, I realized. They were putting the images directly into our heads. "The spelunkers," I said suddenly. "They must have damaged something important, a sacred site." Chen was backing toward the tunnel we'd come through. "We need to get out of here." "Wait," I said, remembering the symbols I'd studied for years. I stepped forward, facing the nearest creature. Slowly, I raised my hand and traced symbols in the air. The same ones I'd seen on the deep cave walls during my solo explorations. The creatures went still. The rumbling stopped. "What are you doing?" Michael whispered. "Trying to communicate," I said. "Trying to tell them we mean no harm." More images filled my mind, clearer this time. I saw the spelunkers breaking off pieces of crystal formations, taking samples from the glowing plants, contaminating the lake with their equipment. "They're angry because the spelunkers were destroying their home," I explained. The lead creature moved toward me, its long fingers reaching out. Every instinct told me to run, but I stood my ground. Its cool fingers touched my forehead, and suddenly my mind was flooded with knowledge. The history of their people, how they'd evolved to move through stone by manipulating the molecular structure of both rock and their own bodies, how they'd watched humans for millennia from the shadows. "They want to show us something," I said, my voice distant even to my own ears. "They want us to follow." "Are you crazy?" Chen hissed. "They just took Williams." "They're not going to hurt us if we respect their territory," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. "This is what I've been searching for my entire career, proof." The creatures moved toward a passageway on the far side of the lake, clearly expecting us to follow. "I'm going," I said firmly. Michael grabbed my arm. "Elaine, this is insane." I looked into his worried eyes. "I have to know, Michael. I have to see." After a moment, he nodded. "Then I'm coming with you." Chen shook her head. "No way. I'm going back for help." "The passages have changed," I warned her. "You might not find your way out alone." She looked torn, fear and logic battling in her expression. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, but at the first sign of danger, we run." Together, we followed the glowing creatures deeper into their world, walking into the unknown with nothing but trust and curiosity to guide us. But as we crossed to the other side of the lake, following our silent guides, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap from which there would be no escape. The creatures led us through a narrow passage that opened into a chamber unlike anything I'd ever seen. The walls weren't rough cave stone, but smooth, almost polished, with intricate patterns carved everywhere. The entire room glowed with soft, blue light coming from strange crystal formations. In the center stood what looked like a stone table surrounded by tall crystals arranged in a perfect circle. The air hummed with energy I could feel on my skin. "What is this place?" Michael whispered. Before I could answer, Chen gasped and pointed to the far wall. Look! There, partly embedded in the stone, was one of the missing spelunkers. He was conscious, his eyes wide with terror, but he couldn't speak. The rock had somehow flowed around his body, holding him in place with only his head and one arm free. Oh my God, I breathed. They're all here. Now that my eyes had adjusted, I could see them. All 4 spelunkers partially merged with the walls like flies caught in honey. They were alive but trapped, the stone slowly creeping up their bodies inch by inch. We have to help them. Michael moved toward the nearest captive. The lead creature stepped in front of him, its long fingers splayed in warning. More images flooded my mind. The spelunkers breaking sacred crystals, contaminating the water, taking pictures with bright flashes that hurt the creature's sensitive skin. They're being punished, I realized aloud. The creatures see them as invaders who damaged their home. That doesn't give them the right to do this, Chen said, her voice shaking. The creature turned toward me, and suddenly I understood what they wanted. Knowledge. They wanted to understand us, just as much as I wanted to understand them. They were curious about surface dwellers. I think I can negotiate with them, I said slowly. I've studied their symbols for years. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, and began tracing the symbols I knew in the air. I tried to convey images of peace, of humans and creatures coexisting, of boundaries respected. The creature tilted its head, considering. Then it pointed to the stone table. I think it wants me to see something, I said. Michael grabbed my arm. Elaine, don't. I have to try, Michael. It might be our only way out. I approached the table slowly. As I got closer, I saw it wasn't made of stone at all, but some kind of metallic material that shouldn't exist in a natural cave. It looked both incredibly ancient and impossibly advanced. The creature gestured for me to place my hand on the table's surface. When I did, symbols lit up across its surface and knowledge poured into my mind. Images of their civilization, their technology, their history. They had been here long before humans, had watched us evolve from primitive ancestors, had sometimes been mistaken for gods or demons when spotted by early humans. They're showing me their history, I said in awe. Behind me, I heard Michael shout. I spun around to see 2 creatures grabbing him, pulling him toward another table I hadn't noticed before. Let him go, I yelled, running toward them. But more creatures blocked my path. In my mind flashed images of examination, of learning, of curiosity. They wanted to study him. No! I screamed as they forced Michael onto the table. Crystal restraints grew from the surface, wrapping around his wrists and ankles. Chen tried to run back toward the entrance, but the passage had sealed itself shut. We were trapped. The creatures surrounded Michael. One held a crystal tool that glowed with intense light. Another began making precise cuts in Michael's clothing, exposing his skin. Stop, I begged, trying to push past the creatures holding me. Back. You don't have to hurt him to learn about us. But they weren't listening anymore. The lead creature placed its long fingers on Michael's forehead, and he went still, his eyes open but vacant. What are you doing to him? I demanded. In my mind came the answer. They were keeping him conscious but unable to move, so they could study a living specimen without resistance. I watched in horror as they began to systematically examine Michael, using crystal tools to take samples of his skin, hair, and blood. He couldn't scream, but tears leaked from his unblinking eyes. Chen had collapsed against the wall, sobbing quietly. I had to do something. These weren't the peaceful, misunderstood beings I'd imagined in my research. They were cold, calculating, scientists with no concept of human suffering. I closed my eyes and concentrated, trying to project my own images into their minds. The pain they were causing, the fear, the violation. I showed them humans and creatures learning from each other through cooperation, not torture. There are better ways, I shouted, forcing the images harder. This isn't right. The creatures paused, seeming confused by my emotional response. The lead one approached me again, its head tilted in what seemed like curiosity. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the crystals flashed brighter. What's happening? Chen asked, looking up in fear. The creatures seemed alarmed. They communicated rapidly with glowing symbols that raced across the walls faster than I could follow. In my mind came a single, terrifying image. Hundreds more creatures, larger and older, awakening in deeper chambers, stirring from some kind of hibernation. The tremors had disturbed them. "Something's coming," I whispered. "Something bigger." The lead creature released Michael from his restraints and gestured urgently toward a small passage I hadn't noticed before. In my mind came clear instructions: escape now before the others arrived. "They're letting us go," I said, rushing to help Michael sit up. His body was covered in small, precise cuts. But he was alive. "What about the spelunkers?" Chen asked. I looked at the humans embedded in the walls. Their eyes pleaded with me. "We can't leave them," I insisted. But another, stronger tremor shook the chamber. Cracks appeared in the walls, and some of the crystals shattered. The lead creature pushed us urgently toward the escape passage, projecting images of larger, more aggressive creatures that wouldn't be as curious or merciful. I made a split-second decision. In my backpack was a small pack of emergency explosives, standard equipment for rescue teams in case of cave-ins. I could use them to seal the passages behind us, buying time for a larger rescue operation. "Help me with Michael," I told Chen. Together we got him to his feet. He was weak but could walk with support. As we entered the narrow escape tunnel, I looked back one last time at the spelunkers. "I'll come back for you," I promised, though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. We half ran, half stumbled through the winding passage, the sounds of growling and skittering growing louder behind us. The tremors were getting stronger. At a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions, I stopped and pulled out the explosives. "What are you doing?" Chen asked, still supporting Michael. "Creating a barrier." I placed the charges strategically along the ceiling. It won't stop them forever, but it might slow them down. Once the charges were set, we moved about 50 yards down what I hoped was the path to the surface. I pressed the detonator. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. Dust and rock fragments rained down as the ceiling collapsed behind us, sealing the passage. "That should hold them," I said, coughing through the dust. But as the rumbling from the explosion faded, we heard something else, a different kind of movement from ahead of us. More creatures were coming from that direction too. "We're surrounded," Chen whispered, her voice breaking. I shined my light forward and saw several pale figures blocking our path. But these weren't attacking. They simply stood aside, creating a path for us. "They're letting us leave," I realized. As we passed the nearest creature, it reached out and touched my temple lightly. A final image burned into my mind, a map of cave systems across the country, all connected deep underground, all containing communities of these beings, and all of them now stirring, awakening, preparing. A warning, or a threat. We moved as quickly as we could through the passages, following the route the creatures had placed in my mind. After what seemed like hours, we saw natural light ahead, an exit to the surface we'd never known existed. As we stumbled out into the fading evening light, I turned back to see a pale face watching us from the shadows of the cave entrance. Then it melted back into the stone, leaving no trace. "We made it," Chen said, collapsing onto the ground. But had we? As the cool surface air hit my face, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't escaped at all. We'd been released, and with a purpose. The creatures had planted something in my mind, knowledge that would haunt me forever. And maybe that had been their plan all along. 2 months have passed since we emerged from that unknown cave entrance. The official report says that a sudden cave-in killed the 4 spelunkers and nearly claimed us too. The eastern passages were sealed off with concrete and marked as permanently closed due to structural instability. Michael spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain the precise, surgical-like cuts all over his body. They called it a unique pattern of trauma from sharp rock fragments. Only Michael, Chen, and I know the truth. Chen quit her job and moved to Arizona. Last I heard, she was working at a gift shop at the Grand Canyon. as far from caves as she could get while still using her geology degree. We don't talk much anymore. Some experiences are too heavy to carry together. I'm still here at Mammoth Cave, though my duties have changed. They've made me head of geological research, which really means they want me to keep quiet about what happened. Superintendent Davis knows we didn't tell the whole truth, but he doesn't want to know what really happened down there. Nobody does. Except me. I sit at my desk, looking at the small blue stain on my palm that won't wash away. Ever since that creature touched me, I've been different. When I cut myself shaving last week, my blood glowed faintly blue in the darkness of my bathroom. The dreams are the worst part. Every night I see the underground civilization in vivid detail, their cities carved into solid rock, their technology that manipulates stone like we manipulate plastic, their preparations for something. This morning I led a routine tour through the main passages. As we passed the famous frozen waterfall formation, a small boy pointed to the wall and asked, "What's that writing, Ranger Elaine?" Everyone looked, but there was nothing there. Nothing they could see anyway, but I saw it. Glowing symbols. That faded as I stared. A message meant only for me. They're spreading through the cave system. I've started finding the symbols in places they've never been before, always disappearing before I can show anyone else. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in remote passages, I hear whispers from behind solid walls. 3 rangers have gone, missing in the past month. They entered dead-end tunnels and never came out. When they reappeared days later, they had no memory of where they'd been. They all quit shortly after. I've noticed small blue marks on their skin, similar to mine. In my private notebook, I've been tracking reports from other cave systems across the country. Unusual tremors in Carlsbad Caverns, unexplained equipment failures in Wind Cave, strange blue fungi appearing in Luray Caverns. The pattern matches exactly what the creature showed me, a map of their territory expanding. Last night I broke protocol again and went deep into the Western Passage, an area still open to the public. I found fresh symbols carved into the... When I touched them, they glowed beneath my fingers, responding to something in my changed blood. I understood their meaning instantly. The awakening begins. Michael still calls sometimes, usually late at night when the nightmares wake him. "Do you think we should tell someone?" he asked during our last conversation. "Someone who might believe us?" "Who would that be?" I asked him. "And what could they do? Bomb every cave system in America?" He had no answer for that. The truth is, I don't know if we should warn people or not. Part of me, the scientist who was ridiculed and dismissed, wants vindication. Wants to stand before my former colleagues and say, I was right all along. But another part, the part that's changing little by little each day, feels a strange connection to the creatures below. They let us go for a reason. They put this knowledge in my mind for a purpose. Sometimes I catch myself standing in front of the mirror, tracing strange symbols in the air that I shouldn't know how to make. Sometimes I press my hands against stone walls and imagine I can feel what's on the other side. Last week, a new researcher arrived at the park, Dr. James Abrams, the fringe archaeologist who once supported my theories. He says he's here to study Native American artifacts, but I know better. He sought me out specifically, eyes gleaming with excitement. "I've been tracking seismic anomalies in cave systems nationwide," he whispered to me in the staff room. "Something's happening, isn't it, Elaine? Something big." I should have reported him, had him removed from the park. Instead, I found myself saying, "Meet me at the eastern section tomorrow night. There's something I need to show you." As I write this final entry in my journal, I'm not sure what I'll do when we reach the sealed passage. Part of me wants to warn him away. Another part wants to help break through the concrete barrier to open the way again. The symbols on my skin glow brighter each day. The whispers in my mind grow clearer. They're coming. Not just in Mammoth Cave, but everywhere. The beings that have watched us from the shadows for millennia are finally ready to emerge, and somehow I've become their messenger. The real question isn't whether anyone will believe my story. The mist had eyes. I've known this since I was a child, but today they were watching me more closely than ever before. My name is Eleanor Donovan, Ellie to everyone who knows me, and I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for almost 5 years now. This morning started like any other day, with me hiking through what the locals call Forgotten Hollow. It's a place where the fog never fully lifts, and the ancient trees seem to whisper secrets if you listen hard enough. See, air was cool against my face as I walked my usual path, the mist swirling around my boots. I stopped to write notes about some strange mushrooms growing in patterns I'd never seen before. They formed perfect circles in some places, like tiny fairy rings from the stories my grandmother used to tell. That's odd, I said to myself, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the forest. The birds were singing and water trickled somewhere in the distance, but something felt different today. Wrong, somehow. I leaned on my grandmother's walking stick, the one she carved herself, and gave to me before she died. Its familiar weight in my hand always made me feel safe even when the forest got weird. And today it was definitely getting weird. In some spots the ground was completely bare, no plants, no moss, nothing. Just dirt, as if something had cleared it on purpose. And the mist wasn't moving right. Wind was blowing from the east, but the fog flowed west like water running uphill. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. 20 years of hiking these mountains, and I'd never seen anything quite like this. That's when I found the footprints. They were huge, easily, twice the size of my boot and deep, like whatever made them weighed hundreds of pounds. But the strangest thing wasn't their size. It was how they appeared and disappeared randomly, as if whatever made them could walk 10 steps, vanish into thin air, then reappear 50 feet away. I crouched down to examine one print more closely. My fingers traced the edge, feeling 5 distinct toe marks. Too big for a bear, too shaped for any animal I knew. A deer watched me from between 2 pines, its eyes almost knowing. It didn't run when I stood up, just kept staring. In the distance, I spotted a black bear doing the same thing, standing completely still, watching. Animals don't act that way, not unless something has changed the rules of the forest. I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. I blinked and suddenly it read 10:08 a.m., 7 minutes backward. I tapped the glass, but the second hand was moving normally now. This had been happening more and more lately, but only in certain clearings, like little pockets where time didn't work right. The air smelled like rain-soaked earth. Petrichor, that's the scientific word, but mixed with something else. Something musky and old, like wet fur and ancient caves, a smell that didn't belong. I took a deep breath and straightened my ranger hat. The white hair that escaped from beneath it danced in front of my eyes. I'd gone completely white by 30, just like my grandmother. Another thing we shared along with our secrets. Something was happening in my forest. Something big. And all those stories my grandmother told me about the old people of the forest kept floating back into my mind. I wasn't scared. Not exactly. But as I stood there with massive footprints at my feet, time running backward on my watch, and animals watching me like they were waiting for something, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't alone in the mist today, and whatever was out there had finally decided to let me know. People around here think I'm weird, and maybe they're right. Not many folks trade a fancy archaeology degree for a ranger's badge, but that's exactly what I did after what happened 5 years ago. I grew up in these mountains with my grandmother after my parents died. While other kids watched cartoons, I listened to grand stories about the old people of the forest, tall beings who could appear and disappear like the mist itself. She said they were here long before us and would be here long after we're gone. They're watchers, Ellie, she'd say, her eyes twinkling in the firelight. They protect the mountains and sometimes they choose a human to help them. I believed her back then. How could I not? But college changed that. I learned about science and evidence, and I packed those stories away like childhood toys. Until I found the cave. I was leading a university dig when my shovel hit something metal. An artifact that shouldn't have been there. Not just because it was deep in the earth, but because it was made of a metal we couldn't identify, covered in symbols. No one recognized. And it was old. Older than any human settlement should have been in these mountains. When I showed my professor, he laughed, called it a hoax. When I kept pushing, showing him more evidence of something ancient living in these woods, my reputation crumbled. Ellie Donovan believes in Bigfoot became the joke that killed my academic career. So I came home, became a ranger to stay close to the mountains, close to whatever truth was hiding here. I live alone now in Gran's old cabin. My ex-husband couldn't handle it. My obsession, he called it. You care more about monsters than people, he said the day he left. Maybe he was right. The cabin walls are covered with maps where I mark the strange spots, places where compasses spin in circles, where hikers report missing hours of time, where the mist moves against the wind. I've filled 17 journals with notes combining what I see with what Gran taught me. The locals leave me alone mostly. But when their kids wander too far into the woods or their dogs won't stop barking at nothing, they come to me. They won't admit they believe, but they know I understand the mountain's moods better than anyone. Lately, my dreams have been different. I see pathways through the forest I've never taken, caves I've never found, and something tall walking just ahead of me, always turning a corner before I can see it clearly. I flipped through my newest journal as I sat on my porch that evening, the day's discoveries still fresh in my mind. Those footprints weren't the first I'd seen, but they were the clearest. Something was changing in the forest. The old people were getting bolder. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. Ellie, you there? It was Mike, another ranger from the east side of the park. I'm here, what's up? We've got missing hikers. Family of 4 from Chicago. Supposed to check in at the Klingman's trailhead 3 hours ago. My stomach tightened. Last known location? Near Forgotten Hollow. Your territory. The footprints flashed in my mind. The watching animals. The mist that moved the wrong way. I'll start searching at first light, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew this wasn't a normal disappearance. They reported something weird on their last check-in. Mike added, his voice lower now. Dad said they felt like something big was watching them from the trees. Thought you should know. The radio went silent. I looked out at the darkening forest, the mist creeping up around my cabin like fingers. Are you finally ready to show yourselves? I whispered to the darkness. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in what almost sounded like an answer, and for the first time in years, I was afraid of what tomorrow might bring. I woke before dawn, my dreams full of shadowy figures and whispered words I couldn't quite catch. The morning was still dark as I packed my gear, flashlight, first aid kit, extra water, and Gran's walking stick. Never went anywhere without that. I tell you, mist was thick as soup when I reached the missing family's last known location. Their campsite looked wrong. Nothing was broken or torn up like you'd see with a bear attack. Everything was just as they'd left it. 4 sleeping bags neatly laid out, a half-cooked pot of oatmeal, a child's stuffed rabbit propped against a backpack. But around the entire campsite was a perfect circle where the grass and plants had been flattened, like something heavy had walked around and around them while they slept. Hello? I called out. Park ranger, anyone here? My voice echoed back, swallowed by the fog. That's when I noticed the stones. Dozens of them, arranged in a pattern too perfect to be natural. A spiral that started small and grew outward, each stone placed exactly the same distance from the next. No hiker did this. No animal either. What are you trying to tell me? Whispered. Not sure who I was talking to. My radio buzzed. It was Mike again. Ellie, we've got more reports coming in. Weird stuff. Trees bent in half without breaking. Ranger Davis says he saw something big moving through the trees yesterday, but when he looked directly at it, there was nothing there. I swallowed hard. Any sign of the family? Nothing yet. Search teams are spreading out from your location. As I clicked off, something caught my eye, a flash of color against the green forest floor. A child's drawing pad. I picked it up, flipping through the pages. The first few showed normal vacation drawings. Mountains, trees, the family's tent. Then they changed. Every page had the same tall, dark figure standing among the trees, watching, waiting. The drawings got more detailed with each page, the figure moving closer to the family's campsite. The last drawing showed it standing right at the edge of their tent. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. Throughout the day, more reports came in. Cameras and phones stopped working in larger and larger areas of the park. A school group all drew the same tall figure when their teacher asked them to sketch what they saw in the forest. Hunters found deer arranged in a circle, alive but sitting unnaturally still, like they were waiting for something. By afternoon, I'd hiked to a part of the park I rarely visited. The trees here were older, twisted into shapes that didn't seem natural. Some bent completely sideways, their trunks parallel to the ground but still alive and growing. That's when I found the wall. Not a man-made wall, but a rock face I'd never seen before, even though I thought I knew every inch of this forest. Carved into it were pictures that made my heart race. Tall, broad figures leading smaller human shapes into mountain openings. The carvings looked ancient, worn by time and weather. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. They choose people. Sometimes, Ellie. Take them away to teach them things. Most come back changed. Some don't come back at all. I reached out to touch the carvings, my fingers tracing the outline of the tall beings. The stone felt warm under my touch, almost alive. Behind
Me!
a branch snapped. I spun around, my hand automatically grabbing Gran's walking stick tighter. Nothing was there, just mist and trees. I know you're watching, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know you took that family. I need to find them. Silence answered me. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something that hadn't been there. Before, in a line of those massive footprints leading deeper into the forest, away from any trail I knew. The smart thing would be to call for backup. To wait for the other rangers. Instead, I took a deep breath and followed the footprints into the unknown parts of the forest. The mist closed in behind me, thick as a wall, cutting off the way back. There was only forward now, and whatever waited, for me ahead. The footprints led me deeper into the forest than I'd ever gone before. The trees grew thicker here, older, with moss hanging like green curtains. My watch said it was noon, but the light was fading fast. I checked my compass. The needle spun in wild circles, useless, great. Another weird spot to mark on my map if I ever made it back to mark anything. Focus, Ellie, I whispered to myself. The footprints stopped at a wall of fog so thick it looked solid. I hesitated, then stepped through. The world changed. One moment I was in the forest I knew. The next, I stood in a valley I'd never seen before. The plants were wrong. Flowers that shouldn't grow in Tennessee, trees with bark that spiraled in impossible patterns. The air felt heavier, older somehow, and my watch now said sunset, though I'd only been walking for an hour. "Hello?" I called, my voice small in the strange quiet. "Is anyone here?" A rustle came from the tree line. I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. That's when I saw them. They stood at the edge of the clearing, 3 figures, each at least 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in reddish-brown hair, thick like a bison's coat. Their faces were almost human but broader, with deep-set eyes that reflected the fading light. I should have been terrified, but something about them felt familiar, like seeing someone you knew as a child but can't quite place. "I'm Ranger Ellie Donovan," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "I'm looking for a missing family." The tallest one stepped forward. Then something impossible happened. It seemed to bend the light around itself, flickering in and out of sight like a bad TV signal. 1 second solid, the next transparent, then gone completely, only to reappear a few steps closer. I gripped my grandmother's walking stick tighter. The carvings along its length suddenly felt warm under my fingers. Then a voice spoke, not through the air but directly in my mind. "We know who you are, Eleanor Donovan." The words formed in my head, along with images of myself as a child, sitting on my grandmother's porch, of me finding the metal artifact in the cave, of me walking these woods alone at night. They'd been watching me my whole life. The lost ones are safe. They saw too much. They were not ready. The family. You took them? I asked aloud, though I knew now I didn't need to speak for them to understand. The giant gestured and the mist parted. There, lying on beds of soft moss, was the missing family. Mother, father, 2 children. They seemed to be sleeping peacefully, their chests rising and falling with steady breaths. Are they hurt? No. They sleep. They will remember only dreams. Another giant approached a nearby plant. It touched the leaves with long, gentle fingers, and I watched in amazement as the plant grew visibly, stretching upward, flowers blooming in seconds. We have been here since the beginning, since before your kind had names for things. We watched your cities grow. We retreated deeper. Images flooded my mind. These beings walking ancient forests, hiding as humans spread across the land, teaching selected people their secrets. The oldest, giant, its hair streaked with silver, stepped forward and touched my walking stick. A jolt of energy ran up my arm. Your grandmother's blood. Your blood. Known to us for 7 generations. She was our friend, our voice. Suddenly I understood why Gran knew so much, why she'd told me those stories, why she'd given me the walking stick. She hadn't been sharing folk tales. She'd been preparing me. Others come now, men with weapons. Angry One leads them. They will harm this place. An image appeared in my mind. Ranger Marshall, my supervisor, leading armed park police through the forest, tracking something. Tracking me. Why show yourselves now, after hiding for so long? The oldest giant's eyes, deep, amber, ancient as the mountains themselves, fixed on mine. Danger comes. Metal monsters will eat the mountain, will destroy our home beneath. We cannot allow this. More images filled my head. Bulldozers, construction equipment, men in suits looking at maps. The development project I'd heard about, luxury homes planned. For the valley on the north side of the park, you must help us, daughter of smoke, as your grandmother did, as her mother before. Your blood remembers, even if you forgot. The giants led me to a clearing where the ground opened into a hidden pathway. Steps carved into stone led downward, into the heart of the mountain. The oldest giant beckoned me to follow. I knew I should be afraid. I knew this was crazy. But the pull I felt was stronger than fear, like finding a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. As I took my first step downward, following these impossible beings into the earth, a helicopter's distant thrum broke the silence. Searchlights cut through the darkening sky. Marshall was coming, and something told me these giants weren't going to hide anymore. The stone steps led down into darkness, cool air rising from below. I clicked on my flashlight, but the oldest giant gently pushed my hand down. No need. The walls began to glow with a soft blue light, some kind of moss or fungus that lit up the tunnel. We descended deeper, the helicopter sounds fading above us. The tunnel opened into a massive cave that took my breath away. The ceiling soared higher than a cathedral, glittering with crystals that caught the blue light. Structures that looked like homes had been built into the rock walls, not crude caves but beautifully crafted spaces with doorways and windows. Dozens more of the giants moved throughout the cavern. Some tended gardens of strange glowing plants. Others worked with tools I didn't recognize. A few smaller ones, children maybe, stopped to stare at me with curious eyes. In the center stood a pedestal holding something that made my heart skip. The same type of metal artifact I'd found years ago, the one that had ruined my career. But this one was intact, not broken like mine. Our memory, our history, from the stars before the mountains grew. Before I could ask what that meant, a booming voice echoed from above. Ellie, are you down there? Marshall, and he sounded furious. The giants tensed, their forms flickering between visible and invisible. He brings death sticks. He fears what he does not understand. I knew what they meant. Marshall was old school, the type who believed any problem could be solved with enough firepower. If he saw these beings, I need to go up, I said. I can talk to him, explain. The oldest giant looked doubtful, but nodded slowly. We will watch. We will protect. I climbed back up the stone steps and emerged into chaos. Night had fallen completely. Flashlight beams cut through the mist as a team of 8 rangers and park police swept the area. The helicopter hovered overhead, its spotlight creating harsh shadows. "Marshal," I called out, raising my hands to show I was unarmed. "I'm here. Everything's okay." He spun toward me, his rifle raised. His face was red with anger and something else. Fear. "Donovan, what the hell are you doing out here? We've been searching for hours." He lowered his weapon slightly. "Did you find the missing family?" "Yes, they're safe. They're..." "Where?" He cut me off. "And what about the things people have been seeing? Davis said he saw something big out here, something not human." I took a deep breath. "Marshal, I need you to listen carefully. There's something living in these mountains, something that's been here long before us. They're not dangerous unless we threaten them." His eyes narrowed. "You've lost your mind, Donovan. First your crazy theories about ancient civilizations, and now this? The family is sleeping. The creatures put them to sleep because they saw too much. They'll wake up soon, with no memory of what happened." "Creatures?" Marshall's knuckles went white around his rifle. "You're talking about monsters?" "No, they're more like guardians. They protect the forest, and now they're afraid because of the development project in the North Valley. It would destroy their home." Marshall laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So that's what this is about? You're making up fairy tales to stop a construction project? This is why you washed out of academia, Donovan." Behind me, I felt movement in the mist. The giants were watching, listening. "Please, just put the guns down," I said, looking around at the other officers. Some were shifting nervously, their flashlights catching strange movements in the trees. "They don't want to hurt anyone. There's nothing out here but bears and your imagination," Marshall snapped. He gestured to 2 officers. "Jenkins, Ramirez, go with Donovan to find this sleeping family. The rest of you spread out and sweep the area." That's when everything went wrong. One of the officers screamed. We turned to see him pointing at a massive figure that had appeared at the edge of the clearing, one of the giants no longer hiding. Marshall raised his rifle. "What the hell is that?" "No." I lunged for him, but too late. The shot cracked through the night. The giant didn't fall, but the forest seemed to come alive in rage. The mist swirled violently, becoming so thick we could barely see. The ground trembled. Trees creaked and groaned like they were waking up, and then time slipped. I saw Marshall fire again, but the bullet hung in the air, frozen. The other officers moved in slow motion, their mouths open in silent screams. Only I seemed able to move normally. They attack. We protect. The giants' voices filled my head as the forest itself seemed to turn against the rangers. Roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around ankles. Branches bent down like arms, grabbing at weapons. Time snapped back to normal. The chaos was instant. Officers fired wildly into the mist. I heard someone shouting about monsters, about demons. "Stop!" I screamed. "Just stop!" Marshall wasn't listening. His eyes were wild with panic as he fired at shadows. Kill them all!" He turned his gun on one of his own men who was trying to run away. The shot hit the ranger in the shoulder, dropping him to the ground. Before Marshall could fire, again an ancient oak tree beside him suddenly twisted, its massive trunk bending like it was made of rubber. With a sound like thunder, it swept sideways, catching Marshall directly in the chest. The impact lifted him off his feet and slammed him against another tree. He crumpled to the ground, unmoving. The remaining officers were running now, fleeing, back toward the main trails. Only Marshall and the wounded ranger remained. I rushed to check on them. The wounded ranger was alive, frightened but stable. Marshall was barely breathing, blood trickling from his mouth. The oldest giant materialized beside me, its eyes sad as it looked down at the fallen man. He brought this upon himself. His fear made him dangerous. "He needs medical help," I said, checking Marshall's pulse. It was weak, fading. "We cannot allow him to bring more death sticks, more fear." The giant touched Marshall's forehead. His eyes flew open, filled with terror as he saw the creature looming over him. Then they went blank, staring at nothing. "What did you do to him?" I whispered. "His mind cannot hold what he has seen, cannot accept. Better this way." The giant turned to me, extending its massive hand. "Come, see what they would destroy. Understand why we must protect it." With the helicopter still circling overhead and the wounded ranger staring at us in shock, I took the giant's hand. We descended once more into the earth, deeper than before, into the true heart of their civilization. What I saw there would change everything. 3 weeks have passed since that night in the forest. 3 weeks since everything changed. They told me Marshall had a stroke. That's the official story. Stress and high blood pressure finally caught up with him. He's alive, but doesn't speak anymore. Just sits in his hospital room, staring at the wall. Sometimes he draws pictures of tall figures standing in the mist, then tears them up. The wounded ranger, Peterson, told a different story at first, about monsters and moving trees. They diagnosed him with toxic exposure from some rare fungus in the forest. He eventually stopped arguing and accepted the explanation. Easier that way, I guess. The missing family was found sleeping peacefully near a ranger station, with no memory of how they got there. The parents remember feeling watched, then nothing. The children still have nightmares about the tall people, but the doctors say that's normal after trauma. No one mentions the bullet holes in the trees. No one asks why 3 officers quit the force the day after. No one wants to know. But I know. I remember everything. I remember what the oldest giant showed me beneath the mountain, a city older than history, with technology we can't understand, and knowledge we've forgotten. I saw artifacts from civilizations that existed before we called ourselves human. I saw maps of stars and patterns that don't match our sky. We were here first, they told me. We will be here after. But we do not wish your kind harm. They showed me how their home stretched under the entire North Valley, the exact spot where developers planned to build luxury vacation homes. How the drilling and foundation work would have collapsed tunnels that had stood for thousands of years. How they had tried to warn people with signs with strange occurrences, but humans never understood. Until me. It's raining today as I sit at my desk in the ranger station, filing my 3rd report this week about unusual atmospheric conditions in the park. That's our new code phrase. The higher-ups created a special task force to study the unexplained phenomena, with me as the lead. They don't know what I know, but they're scared enough to listen now. The development project was canceled last month after a series of equipment malfunctions and engineering concerns about ground stability. The official report blamed underground water patterns. The CEO blamed bad luck and superstitious workers who refused to return to the site after their machines kept breaking down for no reason. I smile, remembering how the giants can affect electronics, how they can make time slip and bend when they need to. My phone rings, the head of the task force calling for my daily update. "Any incidents to report, Ranger Donovan?" "Just some fog patterns consistent with previous observations," I say, which is our way of saying the giants are active but not causing problems. "All hiking paths are clear. No visitor reports of missing time." "Excellent. Keep me posted." He doesn't ask for details anymore. Nobody does. They're happy with simple answers that don't disrupt their view of the world. After dark, I hike out to Forgotten Hollow. The mist parts for me now, like curtains opening to welcome me home. My grandmother's walking stick hums with energy in my hand. The oldest giant is waiting in our usual meeting spot. Since that night, I've become what my grandmother was, a bridge between their world and mine, a keeper of secrets, a protector of the forest. The wounded man speaks of us, the giant tells me, meaning Peterson. Few believe, but some do. I'll handle it, I promise. People want logical explanations. They'll convince themselves they saw bears or mountain lions. And the sleeping ones? The family? The children draw pictures of you in their therapy sessions. The parents think it's just imagination. The giant nods, satisfied. We've established a fragile peace. They stay hidden from most humans, and I make sure humans don't threaten their home. Sometimes I wonder if I should tell the world the truth, show them the evidence. But then I remember Marshall's blank eyes, the terror that turned him against his own men. Humans fear what they don't understand, and fear makes us dangerous. So I keep their secret. I walk between worlds, and on foggy mornings when hikers report strange footprints or missing time, I smile and write it up as atmospheric conditions, because some truths are better left in the mist. As I turn to leave, the giant speaks one last time. Your grandmother would be proud, daughter of smoke. The words warm me more than they should. I head back toward my cabin as the mist swirls around my feet, sometimes moving against the wind. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of the giants, not of the forest's strange ways. But sometimes, when I catch visitors staring too long into the trees, when I see the recognition dawn in their eyes as they spot something tall moving just beyond sight, I worry, because the mist is getting thinner between our worlds. The giants are growing bolder, and sooner or later people will have to face the truth that we were never alone in these mountains. But that's a problem for another day. For now, I am the Watcher, the bridge, the keeper of secrets, and the mist still has eyes.